practice in the United States, and Jenny Gow.
Thank you so much. It's a glorious day here in Austin, the Circuit of the Americas. You can hear the bands maybe playing in the back. This feels like the music capital of the world. It's such a party atmosphere, and it's all getting ready for round 19 of the F1 World Championship. A closely fought championship, but is it a title contending championship? 52 points is the gap between Max Verstappen at the top and Lando Norris, who's hunting him down with just 6 races to go. And this is the first of a triple header. So, can Lando do anything? Can McLaren find an answer for Red Bull? That's the key question. And talking us through today's action, with FP1 getting underway in about 5 minutes' time, maybe 4. It is our lead commentator, Harry Benjamin. And Harry, the setting is perfect, isn't it? Beautiful day, blue skies, fluffy white clouds everywhere, and everyone loves coming to Austin.
Yeah, they certainly do. We've got a fantastic view outside of our commentary box, which is positioned just on the exit of the final corner, looking over the pit lane. I mean, really, the US Grand Prix, Texas, it really has become home to it, and I think it's only been firmed up as a favourite with the additions of Miami and Las Vegas over the last couple of years. So it's just brilliant to be here, and a really good circuit as well. 3 sectors, all offering something a little bit different, and I think we're going to have some competition up front.
Yes, please. This is a circuit that the fans love coming to, and the drivers love driving it. Everyone loves being here. I mean, the Phil Hill, which is the hill going up to the first turn, on the right-hand side is just full of people with picnic blankets, little chairs. They're soaking up the sunshine. The US flag is just in front of them. It's a glorious place to watch F1. And Mark Priestley, former F1 mechanic, for McLaren, Ted, broadcaster, author, everything basically. Mark, you can't get much better than this, and we keep saying that this year, but it's just great.
Yeah, I mean, F1's in a wonderful place, isn't it? And I think we've had this little kind of mini break, haven't we, since the last round, and it's only served to sort of heighten the anticipation and the excitement for what. We've now got 6 races to go. 3 of those are sprints. We've got a new driver on the grid. We've got a championship that's really bubbling up to come towards its climax towards the end of this season, and we don't know who's going to win not only the title but any of the remaining 6 races. That's a wonderful place for Formula One to be in. So the excitement around this sport right now is well and truly justified.
Yeah, and the name you were alluding to then, Liam Lawson, New Zealander, 22 years old, has had some experience, Harry, in an F1 car, but now he's a proper F1 driver, not just sitting in for Daniel Ricciardo. He's taken the seat of Daniel Ricciardo.
He has indeed, and I think it was the writing on the wall for a long time for Liam Lawson. Of course, we saw him last year as well, doing 5 Grand Prix outings, managed to score points in Singapore. 9th place he got last year, actually beat Tsunoda twice during his 5-race stint. And, you know, there will be pressure on Liam Lawson. He's in to the end of the year, the 22-year-old from Hastings in New Zealand, and that seat is up for grabs. He needs to, at the very least, match Yuki Tsunoda's performances until the end of the year. But you know what? If he comes in and starts beating Tsunoda, then I think Sergio Perez in the big team at the front will be under even more pressure than he already is. There's a lot of pressure in Lawson to try and make a case for that seat, but he gets the RB outing for the rest of the year.
We were driving in today to the circuit, and there's lots of developments everywhere. You look in Austin, and then as you come to the track, and in fact, they're building a roller coaster. And some fairground rides have popped up as well here at COTA. And one of them is a giant seat that goes from about halfway down the start-finish straight and up the hill, all the way down to where the start-finish line is. And it's how many feet up in the air, I don't even know. But I would not be caught on that chair going down a very fast speed for love nor money. But it does feel like this is its own circus, this is its own fairground at the moment, and the roller coaster is a ride that some of those drivers aren't wanting to be on.
Well, I suppose the thing about this circuit is that, you know, or more and more circuits as well, is that it's certainly more than just the racing event now, isn't it? It's all about what goes on alongside the music acts as well. I think we've got Eminem, and we've had Sting in the past for Eminence before this weekend, and it really is starting to gather pace and momentum as much off the track as it is on it. But we will get some on-track action straight away. The green light is on at the end of the pit lane, and we have got free practice 1 underway. And for those who wish to do a sync, it's 59 minutes and 40 seconds remain of FP1. Now, of course, if you just need a quick reminder, it's a sprint weekend. We've got 3 remaining to the end of the year. This is the first of them, so we'll only have 1 practice session before we get stuck in to qualifying for the sprint race later on this afternoon. And Mark Priestley, for a track that has been pretty much completely resurfaced as well coming here, it's a bit less bumpy. That's what is to be expected with that. A lot of teams bringing upgrades. We say it all the time in a sprint race, it's not a lot of time to get up to speed.
No, it's a very important session, this one. You know, FP1 is normally the sort of the least representative session of a race weekend, where the teams tend to just be very gentle with their cars. They tend to just find their feet, you know, bed the new technology in, get a little bit of data collection from things like the great big aero rakes you often see in the car. But this weekend, this one single practice session that we have on the Friday is really very important for all the reasons that you just said there, Harry. A lot of the track resurfaced, and that will present different levels of grip for the teams. They won't know that until right now. They'll have their best guess at it, of course, as they always do, but this is the first time they really get to put their cars on the circuit, of course, and find out exactly what the tyres that we have this weekend, how they interact with this new tarmac. It's going to be crucial information as the weekend rolls on.
Max Verstappen straight out onto the circuit. Flovis paint as well on the side and the rear end of his Red Bull car. Red Bull bringing and trying out some new upgrades on the floor and the engine cover. At least that's what they've declared to us on the presentation list that we get before they get going. In terms of the track, if you need a reminder, completely resurfaced for this year. 20 corners, 11 to the left, 9 to the right, just over 5.5 kilometres, around about 3.4 miles. And that first sector really is a mixture of high-speed corners. You need the high downforce there. Then you come into sector 2, really dominated by that long back straight, low drag, low downforce required for that. And then sector 3 is pretty much made up of low-speed corners. So you really kind of need a bit of an all-rounder here.
It's a really great circuit for that, you know, and if we look at the current form guide, you've got to say that McLaren have really got a car that is the best all-rounder so far, and certainly since the midpoint of the season onwards. They tend to be able to work everywhere in all conditions, under all sets of circumstances, at different phases of the weekend. Bodes really well, of course, for them for the rest of the season. The unknown, I guess, coming into this season, this event, is that a number of teams have brought upgrades. Red Bull have brought some significant parts to the car, other teams as well, Mercedes too. What we don't yet know, because this will be perhaps the last big upgrade for this season before they start to then focus on to 2025 and 2026. What are these upgrades going to do, particularly in the hands of Red Bull in the championship fight? Can they bring an upgrade package that finally works on their car and delivers the performance that might keep them in touch with McLaren, you know, for the rest of this season? From a neutral's point of view, I'm sure we'd all love to see this title go right to the wire. It's very finely poised right now, but the car with the biggest advantage ahead of this weekend was clearly McLaren.
Absolutely. Lando Norris is currently 52 points behind Max Verstappen. Mathematically, as we're just having a look at a replay of Franco Colapinto, nearly having a little bit at the moment as he rises over the top of the crest at turn 9, manages to hold it, and indeed he had one of the Red Bulls behind him, just having to ease off the throttle as they make their way round the kink of 10 towards the braking zone of 11 that sets you up for that long back straight, but Colapinto lives to fight another day. The battle at the front then. Norris 52 points behind. He needs to outscore Max Verstappen on average by 8.9 points per race.
State of play is this weekend.
Well, I think it's just like that is the state of play this weekend. Verstappen has got to keep his advantage, but it almost feels like Max Verstappen can't win. He knows he can't go out for the outright battle. So what is that state of play for Red Bull and Max Verstappen this weekend?
Well, as I said, they will be pinning their hopes that the state of play as it has been will change from this weekend onwards with the new upgrades. They're hoping they've got performance on this car that will bring them back into contention for race wins, because the reality is that although we started this season with Max Verstappen and the Red Bull being so dominant, we even thought they might go ahead and win every single Grand Prix of the year. Clearly that hasn't happened, because McLaren and others have taken giant leaps forward. Maybe Red Bull have fallen back a little bit as well, and that's meant that they no longer have the fastest car. So I guess the mindset of Max Verstappen and Red Bull in recent races has been more around damage limitation almost. How can we get the maximum points that we can achieve, forgetting essentially about the race win and thinking more about the bigger picture of the championship. So that's a position Max hasn't really had to be in for a long time, because he's had such a dominant car for so long and not really much in the way of competition.
Well, he has just gone fastest, Max Verstappen, a 1:37.593. He's a tenth ahead of George Russell. Obviously, very early stages, and what is a completely green track. Everybody out there on the hard compound tyre, with the exception of Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber, who's out there on the medium tyre, and Zhou Guanyu, the other Sauber driver, is on an outlap at the moment, has gone out on the soft tyre. Pirelli bringing the same tyre compounds as last year, middle of the range. The C2 is the hard, the C3 is the medium, and the C4 is acting as the soft. This is the sound of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren in a slightly tweaked livery. They've gone for more chrome colour, back to the almost the olden days, the early 2010s style McLaren. A little bit of a lock-up though for Oscar Piastri, front left at the end of that long straight, coming into the left-hander of 12, has to run wide. It's not the first time we've seen that at COTA, it won't be the last.
No, that's right, and the reason that everyone's running around right now on the hard compound tyre, which of course for those new to Formula One will be a tyre that would last longer, has a little bit longer, more longevity to it, but it's not the fastest of the three compounds available. That would be the soft tyre. So they're running around on the hard tyre because these are the sort of installation laps, the early laps with the car's been reassembled. They're just making sure that there's no issues on the car, and as I said earlier on, they're finding their feet with the different grip levels on the parts of this track that have been resurfaced. It's a completely new landscape in that regard. So they don't want to use up a set of what will be really valuable soft tyres that they're really going to want to need for the qualifying sessions that come later in the weekend. So this is a bit of an exploratory time, and as this session moves on, we are highly likely to see people move towards the softer end of the range and put in some representative lap times. Yeah,
and the abrasiveness of the track may well have changed due to that track resurfacing, which of course will have an effect on the tyres, should alleviate the bumps that have become a little bit notorious around this COTA track. Also, fake gravel has been installed at certain runoff areas, and some of those verges narrowed by about 1.5 metres. We've seen that as a bit of a trend that is coming into more and more tracks. Turns 6, 13, 14 and 15 have all experienced that in an effort to try and combat track limits. And of course it was here last year, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton both disqualified at the end of the race for excessive wear on their plank underneath the car, going out and hitting the bumps, finding those bumpy bits off the track. Is that going to be something they're weighing in the back of their mind coming into this weekend again? Absolutely, and you know, that's partly what this session will be all about, because with the current generation of Formula One cars, the most performance typically comes from running them as low as you can. A lot of the aerodynamics are created and that downforce generated from the underside of the car, so you get the most out of that by running it as close to the racetrack. But the circuit is quite bumpy, and therefore if you're too low, you do start to grind away at what we call the plank, the sort of piece that sits right on the lowest point of the car underneath the chassis, and if you wear too much of that away, as you said, you face disqualification. So this session will be about finding that out, understanding what kind of ride height they can get away with. They don't want to be too high, and of course they don't want to be too low either. Carlos Sainz to the top of the times. Ferrari 1-2 at the moment. Sainz ahead of Leclerc, then it's Norris, Perez and Alex Albon in the Williams, the top 5. Bottas, Ocon, Verstappen, Gasly and Russell, the top 10. Hamilton, Colapinto, Hulkenberg, Alonso is 14th ahead of Stroll. Then it's Liam Lawson ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, Kevin Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu and Oscar Piastri currently 20th and last, just coming to the end of what should be his first proper competitive lap time as we start to get properly into this free practice one session. Let's check back in then down the pit lane with Jenny Gow.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just outside the Red Bull garage, and it's actually quite quite a long way down from the neighbours of Mercedes. There's a big gap in the middle where the wall is, so they're kind of like an island on their own, but plenty of analysing and looking at computers with 9 minutes this session gone. And the sun is baking hot down here. It's a very different day to the one we woke up to, where it was kind of overcast and a bit cold, but yeah, it's going to be very hot down here. And just thinking about upgrades, Ferrari don't seemingly have an upgrade here this weekend. Neither do Williams. All other teams have at least something. And looking at McLaren, Lando Norris is running the new front wing for the whole this weekend. However, they are both trying it out and doing back-to-back tests this session. So lots of data being analysed.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. It's interesting that, because Ferrari's team principal Fred Vasseur in the build-up to this weekend did say that they were going to be bringing something, their last package, to this weekend. Now, we do get a presentation list delivered to us of all the upgrades that teams have brought, but of course they don't actually have to list all of them, just the ones that are visible. So Ferrari could have brought something and we just don't know about it.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. And actually the reality is, and the reality from inside a team is that most weekends there is something new on the car, and it might even be software, it might be changes to the systems on board, or it could be small parts that we never see from the outside. But I think one thing I heard coming out of Ferrari this week is that they're still not really that confident about the last set of upgrades as to fully understand them. And that was one of the considerations they had this weekend, is to really get a grip on a circuit like this, which is a bit more normal than some of the street track, to understand whether what they've got on the car right now is a good baseline to develop from.
Just had a little bit of a spin at turn one, and you know what, I'm really not happy about the Alpine look, because they've got a bit of a unique, a special livery where they're celebrating. They've got a partnership with I think the new Indiana Jones game, and they've gone all McLaren papaya all of a sudden, which is a nightmare.
It's so similar, isn't it? It's the car that's normally sort of pink and blue is now, I guess, kind of orange, and I know McLaren is papaya, so McLaren fans, don't come at me. I know it's not orange, but this looks very, very similar, and as a quick glance, it's very easy to get them confused.
It was Pierre Gasly with the spin coming into turn one, lock up on the front left, and as he turned it into the left-hander, the back end just went round.
All okay?
Yeah, just lost it on braking.
And that's the sound of the Alpine spinning around. Managed to get it back going again, though. And heading up the hill, this is a replay, the sound you're hearing of Lewis Hamilton into the braking zone. Again, struggling to get it turned into the left-hander. I mean, it's still early stages, so lack of grip there for Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. Yeah,
still on the hard tyre, as we said earlier on. These are the tyres that will give the least amount of grip, and it's a green, what we call a green circuit, freshly resurfaced in parts, and that particular area that Lewis was on there is the new, fresh, very dark coloured tarmac. So the combination of the harder tyre, the new tarmac, slightly cooler temperatures, as Jenny says, the temperature rising quite rapidly, and it will continue to do so as the day goes on. But all of those things combined mean that the grip levels are probably not quite where they will be when things really heat up later.
47 minutes and 13, 12, 11 seconds remain. Verstappen currently tops the times now with a 1:35.538, over 2.5 tenths clear of Carlos Sainz. Now, just coming back to this battle at the front, look, 52 points is a lot. And Singapore for Lando Norris was a pretty dominant win by over 20 seconds. But I just wonder, both Max Verstappen and Red Bull, Lando Norris and McLaren, while on track, the driver can try to focus and deliver lap time after lap time. There's a lot of off-track noise going on, but for both of them, for Lando Norris, there's the chatter about, well, actually he won dominantly in Singapore, but he nearly put it in the wall twice. Has he got the maturity and the race experience of challenging for a championship to be able to consistently now run at the front? And then on the other side, a lot of news once again coming in to Red Bull about the changes that the FIA have made to the ride height adjustment, as Lewis Hamilton coming down out of turn 2 as you make your way through 3, 4 and 5, completely losing his Mercedes, doing a full 360, carrying so much speed. And as he went through the first kink of turn 3, the left-hander, the car just completely bottoming out, and round he went. Great car control in the end for Hamilton to get it back going, but that would have been a scary moment. He just got through on the Haas, who had to find a way around.
Tyres.
check the floor.
When I come in, you have to check those tyres, and the floor is what Hamilton was saying, and it was Nico Hülkenberg who got a grade A view of it.
Yeah, and what happened there was he was overtaking Hülkenberg going slowly, which pushed Lewis perhaps a tiny bit offline. It's a very fast section. When you're really reliant on the car's downforce, you're flat out through there. It's a wonderful section of racetrack, but he got onto the curb a little bit too much. I think the bottom of the car just bottomed out on the curbing, which raises the tyres slightly off the ground, or at least limits the grip that they have, and he very quickly went round. So it was dramatic. He didn't hit anything, so he'll get away with it, although those tyres are pretty much destined for the scrap heap now.
6-time winner of the US Grand Prix, most successful man around the circuit of the Americas is Lewis Hamilton, into a spin in the early stages of free practice 1 here in Austin. The one and only practice session we'll get, as it's a sprint weekend, so we'll have the practice session and then we'll go straight into qualifying for the sprint this afternoon, and you'll be able to hear that in full on 5 Sports Extra from 25 past 10.
4 for Lewis, because I had a big moment there as well.
Yeah, looks like it was,
that's weird. Yeah, have a look at mine, because I had something very similar there.
That was George Russell on the radio, wondering if there's maybe something linked there between both Mercedes, having some moments coming through that really fast section, almost a bit of an imitation of Silverstone's Maggotts and Beckett's. Andrew Benson, the BBC's F1 correspondent, joins us now, and actually, Andrew, we're just hearing George Russell's car now coming through that same sequence of corners. Took a bit of curb on the inside, slightly unsettled the car, but he didn't go full 360 like his teammate.
He wasn't quite as far on the curb, was he, Russell, I think, but he was also overtaking cars, or had just done, interestingly, before that moment. It might be nothing, but I think that's maybe a little bit of a concern for Mercedes. 2 cars, both with upgrades on them, aerodynamic upgrades. That's a high-speed corner. Has there been some kind of disruption in the airflow when they turn the wheel at that pitch and yaw angle, Mark, for example? Is that what's caused those moments?
It's either going to be something like that, because the car does move around a huge amount when you turn the wheel in terms of its geometry, very specifically, in very certain specific ways to help the car. If they've got that wrong, or if something's not quite right, that will massively affect it, as you say. The other thing, it could be that they are trying to run the car as low as possible, as we said earlier on, and maybe it's just a little bit too low, and getting onto that curb, they are bottoming out, and that's also really bad news if that's the case, because if you're forced to raise the car's ride height to compensate for sections of the track like that, you're compromised everywhere else too.
Well, George Russell's just had a spin coming out of the exit of turn 1 as well. He's facing backwards, rolling down the hill. He's still got the car going. He's just trying to find a gap to rejoin the track. So I wonder if this is slight cause for concern for both Mercedes cars, as Russell manages to get it turned back around, has to have a little jaunt over the grass and rejoins. Little adjustment on the steering wheel. Green flag back out. Lewis Hamilton has made it back to the pits, and Jenny Gow is outside Mercedes now. Jenny, what can you see?
Yeah, well, they've forensically looked at these tyres. They've taken them off, as they would do anyway. And I had a good look at them while they were putting them back into the covers, and I thought they'd be absolutely ruined. But they looked okay, which is so weird, because, as you say, you took so much speed into the section of the S's at the top of the hill, but looked okay when it came to the tyres, so a bit strange. So they're looking at getting him back out. They'll do that as quickly as they can. New set of tyres have gone on, and they're hurriedly scurrying in that garage to return him to the track.
Thanks, Jenny. And we've just seen replays of the full George Russell spin. I mean, we saw Gasly a few moments ago, Hamilton as well, both struggling to turn it in. Gasly went fully round, and Russell has done the same thing. He's just gone a bit further down the hill coming out the exit of turn 1.
It was actually a sort of embarrassingly slow incident for George Russell there, but it's either going to be that they have got an issue with the car and with the upgrades they've put on the car, and that could be a very real concern for them, because both drivers seem like they're not very comfortable yet, although it's very early days. And the other part of this is, as we keep saying, the circuit will be very low grip in comparison to where it will end up being at this point. The more rubber that goes down, as the more cars start to circulate, of course that grip will increase. So it could be any one of those things, but I'm sure that at Mercedes right now, they've got a lot more data than us, but they will start to have some concerns when both drivers are having very, very similar issues on track.
Well, a bit of a flurry of action there for a few moments. Just under 40 minutes left remaining of free practice. Well, I was beginning a point before that all kicked off, and the point was basically getting the news coming in about this change to ride height adjustment. theoretically, the FIA have brought in, and it's on the basis of something, Andrew, that's been going on with Red Bull. Can you fill us in on this and how much of an impact this will be?
Well, if you listen to Red Bull, it's not going to have an impact. We'll have to wait and see. What it is, it's a device inside the cockpit that Red Bull can use to adjust the height of the T-tray or bib. So that's what Formula 1 teams call the front of the floor. Now, Red Bull say it's inaccessible when the car is fully assembled. That's kind of not the point. The point is, and this is what the Red Bull's rivals are concerned about, is have Red Bull been using that device in the cockpit to adjust the ride height of the car, or the height of the T-tray, during Parc Fermé, which is when the cars are locked down after qualifying every Grand Prix weekend, and you're not allowed to make changes to the specification. Of course, Red Bull say they haven't. But the concern is that it was possible to do that. So what the FIA have done is they've asked Red Bull for now, they've asked Red Bull to make changes to that part of the car. We don't know what those changes are, but it presumably means taking the device away, right? And in the meantime, a seal has been put on that part. At the moment, the seal has been put there by Red Bull as reassurance. After first practice, the seal will become an official one from the FIA, so that device that adjusts the T-tray height cannot be accessed, or the FIA, I should say, have reassurance that it can't be accessed at any time when it's not allowed.
And just to explain why you would want to do that, because the car's going to Parc Fermé at the end of qualifying, or at the beginning of qualifying rather, effectively, in an ideal world, you'd have your car set up very differently for qualifying when you're on that super low fuel load. You're just all about going for the one flying lap, to the way that you would have it set up in an ideal world for the race, when you're trying to look after tyres, you're going for the long distance, heavy fuel load stints, of course. You don't have that luxury in Formula 1 to completely change your car between Saturday and Sunday. But if that device, as Andrew explained, were able to be used to make an adjustment like that, and the question would be, could they do that without anybody knowing? It would be wholly legal to make a change like that to the car if it had been done. There's no evidence to say it has been used, as Andrew rightly said there. But I think one point to mention is, Red Bull have said this device is not accessible when the car's fully assembled. Well, after qualifying, the cars get almost completely disassembled. So at that point, it would be very much accessible, you would imagine. So that's what people are speculating about right now.
So this is definitely not the last we're hearing of this.
I doubt
this is going to go on, Andrew?
No, well, there's a press conference this afternoon between these two sessions, right, where Zak Brown, the McLaren Racing CEO, is in it. I know that McLaren are very, very upset about this situation, and I'd be very surprised if Zak Brown doesn't say something in that press conference. Equally, Red Bull are busy stirring themselves. Christian Horner, I know, has already briefed some people this morning. Red Bull team principal McLaren had to make further changes to their rear wings after the
Mini DRS
controversy in Baku. That's kind of true, but kind of not true at the same time. It's the same. It's actually the same. It's a consequence of the same situation that happened post Baku before Singapore, if you remember. McLaren said there was nothing illegal about their wing, but they had conversations with the FIA, and as a result of those conversations, they chose themselves, they say, to make changes. Made changes to the wing in Singapore. They've now made similar changes to the whole family of wings. Is that a new story, or same story as we wrote 4 weeks ago, but just the sort of second step of that story? Another journalist and I were discussing that question before I came on air. I still haven't completely resolved it in my mind, Harry.
Well, we've got a press conference to try and resolve it a little bit more. I just want to, all of this happening, the impact that could directly maybe play on this championship fight that we've got going on. And actually, Andrew, I want to call you up on something that you've said about Max Verstappen over the course of this whole year. He's had so much going on off the track. You know, we've got the swearing thing happening at the moment where he's not really talking much, continuing to do that in the press conference this weekend. Obviously, he's had a lot of things to deal with at the start of the year with the allegations made against Christian Horner, which he has always denied, and his father, Jos Verstappen, also being a very strong character within that team. Where are you at with Max Verstappen's sort of mental resilience that he's had to deal with all of that in the background while he's just simply trying to perform on track too?
If there's one person in the paddock who hasn't got a problem with mental resilience, I'd say it's Max Verstappen. Also Fernando Alonso, by the way, and Lewis Hamilton probably. But I don't think mental resilience is Max Verstappen's issue. You are right about the swearing thing. That is still going on. We had another amusing news conference with Verstappen yesterday where I was trying to get clarity from him as to exactly how he was going to conduct himself in the FIA press conferences this weekend, if he's in them after the fun we had in Singapore. People may have seen me in the photos from Singapore
Benson
talking to
in full flow. You need to get that picture framed on the mantelpiece.
Talking to Max about it. Yeah, it was quite an amusing situation. Anyway, bottom line is it took a few questions to get it properly out of him, but he is going to carry on that policy this weekend. He's not happy about the way the FIA have dealt with him on that situation, and neither, by the way, are the rest of the drivers. They're very unhappy. They've been talking about it on their driver WhatsApp group in the gap between Singapore and Austin, and they're going to put out some kind of statement after this race weekend about how they feel about that whole situation. Why they're not doing it now, I don't know, but I guess because they haven't quite finalised exactly what they want to say. But the gist of it is that, just to rewind it briefly, it all started with when Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president, did an interview in which he suggested that he wanted the drivers to stop swearing on the team radio. They all thought that was ridiculous. You know, their adrenaline's high, their heart rate's high, they're talking to their team. It's effectively a private conversation that's being broadcast to the world, or snippets of it are being broadcast to the world, and the swear words are bleeped out anyway. And I think the drivers all feel, as to a man, that the audience deserves to see their character in that way. They accept that they shouldn't be effing and blinding in press conferences, and they don't. You know, okay, Verstappen used the F word once in this particular press conference in Singapore. Did that really merit community service from the FIA? I think the drivers would collectively say, no, that was ridiculous. That's why Max Verstappen is so unhappy. Just to go back to now your question, I think it's been remarkable how he has dealt with the whole situation this year. He has been in the middle of an absolute maelstrom at that team ever since the allegations against Christian Horner of sexual harassment made by a female employee, which he denies, by the way, and Red Bull have cleared him into internal investigations. Ever since those emerged in early February, that team has been under the spotlight. It's been in some considerable degree of inner turmoil, which we've seen from the fact that Adrian Newey is leaving, quite largely as a consequence of the Horner allegations. We've seen that Jonathan Wheatley, the sporting director who's been there for 18 years, is leaving. We learned in Singapore that Will Courtney, the head of strategy for the last 10 years, who's been there since the Jaguar days, is leaving. We know that Jos Verstappen, as you say, Max Verstappen's dad, is very unhappy about Horner still being in charge of that team. He hasn't hidden that. When a dispute between Horner and Jos Verstappen came up in Austria about driving a historic car of all things, Max made it very clear he was on his dad's side, not on his team boss's side. In the midst of all that, to produce a season of such exemplary quality is hugely impressive.
Massively so. Mark, would you agree with that? How impressed have you been by Max Verstappen? Considering now, I suppose we look at it, he's in this fight, but he is almost on the back foot.
Yeah, which is, as I said earlier, it's the first time that's happened, really, isn't it? Because he's had a run of dominance, all justified and fully deserved, but he hasn't really had too much in the way of a fight, not from outside of his own team, and not even from within his own team with his teammates. So, not to take anything away from what Max has achieved, but now we're seeing him under some pressure. He's taking it in his stride and dealing with it. As we said, he's switching his mindset to thinking about the bigger picture at times when he has to. It's not the sort of impatient, often petulant Max Verstappen that you could have thrown at him as a criticism in his earlier days. We don't see that anymore. He's a much more mature Max Verstappen that's thinking about what's the most important thing here. It's winning the championship. It's not winning on any given day, it's winning the championship. And sometimes that means driving differently. It means taking different types of risks or less risks. And that's the mark of a kind of complete Formula One driver, isn't it? It's got the ultimate speed when they need it, but it also is able to just be patient when that's what it requires too.
Well, 52 points with Max Verstappen having the advantage still, and after being a little bit quiet on track, it's now started to gear up again. Verstappen is out on track. Jenny, I mean, you have to say Verstappen is still the absolute favourite for this championship, but he has still got to deliver on the track every weekend, and they can't afford any kind of DNF as well.
Absolutely, the pressure is certainly on him, and I just wonder how much pressure Max Verstappen really feels, because yes, he hasn't had a win since Spain, which is a long time ago, but he doesn't need to win these races, does he? He just has to finish second every race, and the championship is his. So he can drive well within his own limits and still bring this championship home. And do you think the style, the way that he's approaching a weekend has changed because of that knowledge? He doesn't have to go out there and be reckless. This championship should come to him if he just manages to finish P2 on track every race.
I mean, it's so curious though, isn't it, Mark? Because describing Max Verstappen as somebody who's just going to come in and achieve the maximum he can. He probably can't win it, but he'll settle for second, be on the podium. That just doesn't sound like Max Verstappen.
It doesn't sound like any racing driver. You know, they're just competitive individuals. They want to win at every opportunity. And of course he will want to do that. And he'll hope, as we said earlier, that the upgrades they've brought will give him that opportunity. An opportunity he hasn't really had for, a few races now. So, look, I think we're all waiting with bated breath, really, as the team will be and Max will be himself, to find out just how good that car is around here on a much more normal or traditional type circuit, and just see how that matches up to the sort of current day McLaren.
Well, he's out on track at the moment, fastest of anybody in the first sector, fastest of anybody in the middle sector. He's come back out, stuck on the soft tyre, makes his way past our commentary box now, up through the gears, round the final corner, across the line, finds over a second. Now he's put the soft tyres on, and it's a 1:33.855 for Max Verstappen. Leclerc second, he's on an outlap now. Sainz, Russell, Norris the top five, Bottas, Lawson, Perez, Tsunoda, Stroll is in 10th ahead of Piastri. Then it's Ocon and Alonso. Hulkenberg's 14th ahead of Albon, Gasly. Hamilton's down in 17th after having a bit of a truncated start to this session with that spin in the first sector. He's 17th ahead of Magnussen. Zhou Guanyu is 19th ahead of Franco Colapinto, 20th and last.
So the two Red Bulls at the moment, the only ones are the front runners to have that soft tyre on.
Tyres are a little bit cold to start a lap.
Yeah, roger that, Max.
So there you go. So Max still not quite happy. He's fastest in the timesheets, but what I was going to go on to say is we haven't really got anything to compare it to yet, because there's nobody else from that group at the front of the field with the soft tyres on. We will be about to see that now, but it just means that Red Bull are running slightly out of sync. And the one we're really interested in, of course, is just how does he compare up to a Lando Norris and a McLaren?
While we're on Red Bull, let's just look at their junior sister team, however they're going to be going forward. RB, we've said goodbye to Daniel Ricciardo last time out in Singapore. We didn't know it at the time, although given the interviews post-race, I think we all knew where that was happening. Liam Lawson, who is a name that will be familiar after 5 Grand Prix outings last year, replacing Daniel Ricciardo when he broke his wrist at the Dutch Grand Prix, and performed very, very well last year in what was the AlphaTauri alongside Yuki Tsunoda. He now gets a run till the end of the year. He's actually been pretty much out there all sessions so far, but he does come into this weekend almost a little bit pressure off, not wanting to put him too much in the spotlight, because when you replace a driver, you also take on their allocation of power unit parts, and they've decided to change the engine in that RB, so he will start at the back of the grid. But what are you expecting, Mark, from Liam Lawson to the end of the year? It's not a slam dunk where he'll be next year, although he'll probably be on the grid, whether it's with RB or Red Bull.
Yeah, he's in a great opportunity. He's in a great position, is the main thing to say, because as soon as you get your foot in the door, as soon as you get a seat on the grid in Formula One, that is an unbelievably rare and valuable chance to show what you can do. So that's where he is. I think it's a smart move from Red Bull to take an extra power unit, to take some of those components that will just take the pressure off from a technical point of view for the rest of the year, but it also takes a little bit of pressure off Lawson, because if you're starting at the back with penalties, there is no real expectation in terms of your finishing position. It gives him an opportunity to start near the back, hopefully make some overtaking moves which will build his confidence. He can move forward, and that's really a great way to start what is a relatively high pressure phase of his career in a slightly less pressurised way.
Did pretty well in the junior categories, third in Formula 2, and then last year was running in the Japanese Super Formula Championship, which many kind of feel is a sort of bridge in between F2 and F1 performance. Here's Perez, radio.
The minutes of the ride in the low speed, I start to bounce a lot more. Yeah, copy.
They're struggling with the ride of that Red Bull in the low speed corners feeling a little bit of that bouncing for Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, who comes into the pit. And yes, he's currently third behind Sainz and Verstappen, his teammate, who is still fastest of them all. For Liam Lawson, though, and for the wider Red Bull driver pool that they've got going on, they're still finding themselves in a bit of a sticky situation, aren't they? Especially when you've got sort of the likes of Franco Colapinto and Kimi Antonelli coming in and performing so well. I mean, Antonelli was always expected to do well. He'll be in the Mercedes next year. Colapinto is the surprise, and I think that's the real issue almost, because he hasn't really been in a fight in the Formula 2 Championship, whereas the next Red Bull driver down on the list is Isaac Hadjar, who is currently in the fight for the Red Bull Championship, but isn't really being talked about. And if this was the Red Bull of old, I honestly feel like we would have seen Isaac Hadjar in a seat by now, a race seat, just to give him a shot. Yeah,
I agree with you, and I think what makes that slightly more strange is that there is a sort of growing feeling across the board in Formula 1 that these young drivers are no longer the risk that they used to be, because we've seen a lot of kind of debut performances and opportunities given to people like Ollie Behrman, Liam Lawson, where they've come in, and Colapinto as well, and really delivered under what must be massive pressure for a young kid with zero experience in these cars. So in the old days you would always favour the side of experience, because this was the pinnacle of motor racing. Experience counts for a lot, and it does in certain situations, but there isn't quite the risk of bringing a young guy in anymore. So I'm slightly surprised, given the struggles that Red Bull have had, to find somebody that they're happy with. Don't forget, the RB programme, the sister team at Red Bull, really exists to try and find, the next Max Verstappen, the next Sebastian Vettel, and they've struggled to make that happen for quite a long time. Been changing drivers, chopping and changing left, right and centre, bringing Daniel Ricciardo back, then letting him go again. I'm kind of with you. Why not give these young kids an opportunity and give them a try?
What I just can't understand, and look, I don't make the decisions, and there's a reason for that, but Tsunoda has been performing well this year. He's made a step up from his previous year. Every year he's made a marked step up, and that's been noted by those within the RB team.
Has he?
Yes.
This year, is it definitely I don't know, is it definitely a step up?
Well, so Lauren Mecchi seems to think so, and at least that's what he said publicly.
But I think the question is,
how do you compare it to Ricciardo? What's the relevance?
Where's Ricciardo?
Yeah.
Which Ricciardo are we getting? Even when Ricciardo was competitive with Tsunoda, which wasn't that often this year, which Ricciardo was that? Was that the Ricciardo Red Bull? The Red Bull Ricciardo, sorry? Was it the Renault Ricciardo? Was it the McLaren Ricciardo? Do you know what I mean in terms of level of performance? And the wider question than that, even with Tsunoda, is why are Red Bull not convinced by him? They're not convinced. It's very clear that he is not a contender for a Red Bull seat ever. But that's very clear.
I know.
So why? And so in that, then the question becomes, what even if he has made an actual step up, to what level and how far?
My point being is, okay, they can see all the data, right? But they're also, Perez hasn't been performing either, right?
Right, but they're still not interested in putting Tsunoda in that car.
But I just don't see, if they're keeping him in one of their teams anyway, where was the harm? And I feel like a Red Bull of not that long ago would have swapped Perez out, put Tsunoda in for a few races. If he absolutely flounders, then you've got your answer categorically.
They feel that they don't need to do that because they feel they already know the answer. That's my point about Tsunoda. Tsunoda's in the car because of Honda.
And as soon as that deal is done, Tsunoda is gone?
I would imagine so, yes. I don't know that, but I would be very surprised if that isn't the case because that's why he's there. And they don't want him in the Red Bull, otherwise they would have put him in the Red Bull by now, right? Because Perez is still not performing very well. Look at him now, he's 8/10 off Verstappen, although he's doing a faster lap now. But so to go back to Lawson, the question, I don't think the question is will he be on the grid next year. The question is which car will he be in? Will he be in a Red Bull or will he be in an RB? And to have any chance of it being a Red Bull, at least initially, he's got to blow Tsunoda out of the water for the next 6 races, or get to a point where he is blowing it out of the water by the end of the season. I think, because if he doesn't, it's very clear that matching Tsunoda is not enough for Red Bull to convince them that that's a quality that's worthy of being in the Red Bull car.
And in the background of all of this, of course, Red Bull nor us know how long Max Verstappen is going to stay at the Red Bull team. He's their superstar, he's the poster boy, he's the one that brings them all of the results right now, and all the conversation we've just had is about who's going to be there to help him, to back him up. what if Max leaves? You know, what about when he does move on? And I'm sure at some point he will, whether it's, I think highly unlikely it's going to be for 2025 now, of course, but for 26, he's looking around at options. Could it be at Aston Martin, you know, with an Adrian Newey? Could it be at Mercedes or elsewhere? But there's every opportunity, every reason with the sort of trouble and disturbances going on at Red Bull, as we talked about earlier on, that Max might not be happy and see his future there. It may not even be the best and most competitive car to be in. So at that point, then they need another Max Verstappen. So all of this talk about finding a second driver or a number 2 driver, it's partly, you know, it's not really the main story, because they need a number 1 driver at some point, and I don't think they've got one in the system that's currently being lined up.
Ironically, Max Verstappen has kind of ruined Red Bull's driver academy over the last few years, because he's so good that no one can really compare. No one can be on that level. When you're keeping maybe a Tsunoda in your sister team as an average benchmark, then you know, where are you at? It feels like you're floundering. Lawson does need to categorically beat him. I just wonder, over all the years of Red Bull drivers and Toro Rosso drivers, AlphaTauri drivers, is there any driver that you think has come through and actually Red Bull have fumbled that one and they've let that person go too soon? They've let that driver slip? Or have they always had a right justification to drop a driver?
Well, the one that they let slip was Daniel Ricciardo back in the day, because when he was in a Red Bull, he was the only guy really to take a fight to Max Verstappen. And I know that things obviously changed when Daniel decided to leave, and it was his own decision. You know, he went to different teams that had different car philosophies that just didn't work, and the new generation of cars, he's never really got to grips with that. So who knows what would have happened had he stayed. But at the time when he did leave Red Bull, he was probably their best hope.
Sebastian Buemi? The look of disapproval from Andrew Benson in the corner.
I actually thought Jaime Alguersuari was quite good back in the day, but he didn't last very long, and he sort of lost faith in Formula One and just disappeared off the scene. But
great DJ now.
Great DJ now, so maybe he's found his niche.
At the time, he was the original sort of youngest driver Red Bull ever they'd ever had. Well, a little bit of a Red Bull sidetrack there. 18 minutes and 29, 28 seconds remain of free practice 1. It's Verstappen and Red Bull, 1 and 2 on the soft tyre, although there's almost 0.8 of a second between Verstappen and Perez. Then comes Sainz, who hasn't put a soft tyre lap on yet. On the hards was his lap time in 3rd ahead of Leclerc. Russell 5th. Norris is out there at the moment on a hard tyre run. Then comes, after Norris, it's Alonso in 7th. Bottas, Lawson, Tsunoda just coming out on an outlap now. He rounds out the top 10. Stroll, Piastri, Ocon, Hülkenberg, Magnussen 15th. Alex Albon is 16th ahead of Gasly, Hamilton, Joe and Franco Colapinto.
So still nobody to really compare to the 2 Red Bulls that sit at the top of the table right now, because they're the only ones of those runners still to run the soft tyre. We fully expect that to happen before the end. One point of note that I just saw a slow motion replay of Lewis Hamilton running around in the Mercedes. A lot of upgrades on that car. Very, very low. A lot of sparks being generated by both the plank under the centre of the car, but also the outside edges of the floor as he goes through the faster sections of this racetrack, and the downforce is pushing it down into the track itself. So it could be that they are running a little bit too low, and as I said earlier on, that's really the sweet spot. That's where you want to get the downforce, by running the car low. It may be when you bring a bunch of upgrades like this, you're kind of going in blind, because it's the first time you put the bits on the car, but you do have a huge amount of simulation that will give you a sort of potential setup. It'll spit out some numbers and tell you what sort of ride height you should be running, what kind of cambers, all the things that you need to put on the car from a setup perspective. It may be that simulation is not quite right, not quite accurate enough, and they're going to have to go and change that. So I think definitely still some work to do at Mercedes, because although we're not seeing real outright lap times from anybody other than Red Bull right now, they just don't look happy.
This is what I love about sprint weekends, though. Yeah. We're left in the lurch. The drivers and the teams are left a bit in the lurch before we head straight into our first competitive session of qualifying for the sprint. I think it's brilliant, really, what it gives us. Now, one of the other stories coming into this weekend, I think only broke yesterday or the day before, and this is kind of off the back of Daniel Ricciardo's fastest lap point in Singapore, which RB label as a fond farewell to the driver, but many also see that as well. He took it away from Lando Norris and McLaren, and that one point could well become crucial in the championship battle. Now, the FIA have announced after Joe Radio.
I have no power. Yeah. It's not recovered.
Staying here.
That was Joe Guan Yu in the Sauber coming into the pits quite slowly with a problem. He's saying he's got no power. The team tell him to stay in gear. He has made it back to the pits, but Joe currently down in 19th. So problems there for the Chinese driver. So the FIA, after the latest World Motorsport Council meeting, Mark, they've decided enough's enough for that fastest lap point. It's gone for next year.
And I'm very happy about that. Well, this is very much an intended pun. I didn't see the point in it. I thought it was one of those things that I just didn't see what it was going to add to the show. I guess the intention was that it might spice up the closing laps of a race, and I guess you could argue that the controversy, if that's what it was, around Daniel Ricciardo stealing it at the end of the last race in Singapore, maybe that was exciting for some people. But it didn't, for me, impact, or it doesn't come about in terms of shaping the race results, because the only time anyone actually goes for it is if they're so far ahead of the guy behind, they've got a free pit stop to come in and put a fresh set of tyres on. It was all very contrived, and I just didn't see why it was necessary. I don't think the show needs it, so I'm quite happy it's gone.
Was there a way, Benson, that we could have maybe kept the fastest lap point in another format, maybe making it available to the whole 20-car field to get a point, or are you quite pleased that it's just been completely scrapped?
I'm with Mark. I didn't see the point of it in the first place. I can't think of the word, which is not good because my job is to think of words. It was kind of like a fake
gimmick.
It was like a gimmick, kind of like a fake construct based on a false premise. I think, the idea was that it might give someone a chance to really push, get some excitement and what have you. But it was a complete misunderstanding of the way Pirelli tyres work in Formula One. It was always going to be a situation where someone would get a fake fastest lap by putting on his Russell's radio.
Give me some feedback how wide drivers are running. Exit turn 9 over that curb.
So turn 9 exit, Verstappen is right up to the blue line, so he's right up to the limit.
That's Russell asking for some feedback. That's turn 9, the sort of left-hander that takes you up over the crest. Then the left-hand kink of turn 10 beckons before you're into the braking zone of turn 11, and then down that long back straight. Seeing a lot of cars actually running out wide, not only turn 9, but others as well. So Russell just wanting to understand how far he can push the limit.
Yeah, track limits are always an issue here, and they were last year. Quite a few people thought that some cars should have been penalised for track limits, and they weren't, because they were last year because they weren't able to police them properly. At various places, I think there's something called sticky gravel, some kind of innovation that's been introduced this weekend. I've not been paying that much attention to that, I have to be honest, because there's so much else going on since I got here in Austin. But the question you asked me was about fastest lap. It was always going to be something where someone put on new tyres at the end of the race. It was either a leader who's got a massive advantage, as Mark said, takes a free pit stop, or someone else in the top 10 who's got a big in a leading car, but who's being a bit rubbish and has a gap to a slower car behind, and hasn't got that much to lose by going out and getting that extra point. And they're doing it for the sake of their teammate, for example. It's a tactical situation. So you saw Red Bull trying to do it with Perez before to help Verstappen in certain situations. To me, that's not what it should be about. It should be fastest lap should be earned in the course of a race situation. It shouldn't be something where you go out and play with it and do what's been going on in the last few years. So yeah, to me, and I'm not the only one. I know Charles Leclerc was saying yesterday he's really glad to see the back of it. Most of the drivers, they either don't care or they're glad that it's gone.
Point for pole?
Keep it. Honestly, it's not my opinion. Doesn't matter, right? I'm just a journalist.
No, I'm interested in your opinion, Andrew.
I'm not a stakeholder in Formula One. I just report on it. But just keep it simple. Stop messing with the point system. What was wrong with 964-321?
Seriously, we can't go about that far. Come on.
But also, of course, some of these little, if we call them gimmicks, these ideas were brought in at a time when we were in a position with a sport where, I'll say it how it was, it might have been a little bit boring for some people. There was one car dominating, for example. We're not in that phase now. We've got such exciting action on track, even right to the very last lap of races on occasions now. We don't need these things. Just let the sport play out and be, entertain people through great racing.
Well, There you have it, though. No fastest lap point from next year. So we'll see out the year as per, and then for 2025 onwards, that will be scrapped. Just over 10 minutes left of this free practice one session. Alex Albon in the Williams was having an all-right first and middle sector, pushing quite hard in that Williams, and then running wide, kicking up the dust as well, and in the end had to run very wide, coming out of turn 19 in the penultimate, approaching the penultimate corner, and then the final corner brings you back onto the start-finish straight. So that rather ruined at the end of Albon's lap time. And indeed, there is a bit of a fight going on in the lower half of the field as well. It's all well and good to get wrapped up in what's going on at the top, but there is a fight. RB are in 6th, Haas just behind in 7th, not much splitting them, just 3 points. Then come the Williams team, Alpine and Sauber, 10th and last, still yet to get off the mark, but it could be a crazy race, and suddenly they are right in the fight. One of the big things to watch out for the future, perhaps, is down at Haas, Mark, with this new partnership with Toyota that's suddenly come back in. They're very keen to say this is not Toyota back in Formula One, but it kind of is.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Of course it's Toyota back in Formula
But
1.
they just don't want to be. We're not, not taking over as a full team again.
Yeah, they're not back in the sense that they're not making a car or an engine. Well, I don't think they actually ever will. It's actually it's largely a marketing thing, and it's large and also to do with the Japanese racing market, in the sense that what Toyota have been finding in recent years is that all the leading Japanese drivers, young drivers and engineers, all want to go to Honda, not Toyota, because Honda has a Formula 1 presence and Toyota didn't. So they've come up with this sort of technology transfer deal with Haas, where they put their name on the Haas car, and Haas benefit from some of Toyota's facilities, and Toyota benefit from some of Haas's facilities, and get a site of Formula 1. But it doesn't sound like it's a build-up to any kind of significant presence beyond that. You never know. Once they've dipped their toes in the water, they may change their mind. But that's not the plan at the moment.
I think they just had a bit of FOMO. Formula One's now developed into such a great place. You kind of got to be here. It's now Formula One's cool now, and they're not in the party. So I think that's what it is. They're just trying to get an invite, and they're doing it through a sort of backdoor way.
But there will be huge benefits to Haas, though. It's not purely marketing. They are going to get some use out of the wind tunnel, I believe, in Toyota's base in Cologne, in building up to actually Toyota helping them build their own wind tunnel at Haas's HQ. So that will be hugely crucial for actually the team that has the smallest resources on the grid.
Yeah, I mean that's right. They have sort of doubled, access to what they can use. As you said, a small team. So now they've got access to a much bigger organisation. So if they use that correctly, if they use that efficiently, they could actually see some benefit from it.
Well, that's what's going on a little bit further down the field. Hulkenberg and Magnussen, the Haas incumbent, still the end of the year, currently down in 16th and 17th on their outlaps. Indeed, we're now seeing a bit of a flurry, seeing some fast lap times, perhaps some simulations for qualifying runs. This is a sprint weekend, so the next session today will be qualifying for the sprint that takes place on Saturday morning ahead of Grand Prix qualifying Saturday afternoon, and then there will be Sunday's Grand Prix. Max Verstappen fastest. I say that he's just been displaced by Carlos Sainz, who comes across the line 2.5 tenths clear, a 1:33.602 for the Ferrari ahead of Verstappen. Hamilton 7 tenths back in 3rd, make that 4th as Alonso comes across the line now and gets his Aston Martin up into 3rd. So starting to get a little bit more of a picture about where we're at, certainly when there's less fuel in the car.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're seeing now. These really are sort of qualifying simulations. So pretty much everybody, bar 2 cars with the soft tyres on now, low fuel. And this really is this one opportunity with just over 6.5 minutes left on the clock to find out what your car's going to do when you take the fuel out, when you put the fastest tyres on, because that's exactly the situation it's going to be in when we next get onto track, as Harry said there, for qualifying for the sprint. So this is the interesting point. This is where we're going to start to see the order genuinely compare from one team to another. George Russell and the Mercedes still not happy. I kind of feel a little bit of concern for Mercedes because they haven't been comfortable all day. They're still suffering with low grip. The car's still bouncing over curbs and spitting sparks up everywhere. That they're not comfortable with the upgrades. Big upgrade package to put on their car, but Carlos Sainz and the Ferrari now gone quickest.
Yeah, and Hamilton's done his soft tyre run, Mark, and he's 7 tenths slower than Sainz and half a second slower than Verstappen. So that Mercedes does not appear to be working very well. Charles Leclerc, by the way, is on a very fast lap at the moment.
Piastri was just on the radio there saying you missed the pit entry. So they've got to go around again as the virtual safety car has come out and is ending straight away, pretty much. So that's I don't think anything's particularly happened. I wonder if they're just doing that as a little bit of a test. They don't normally do that in FP1.
Well, they messed up Leclerc's flying lap, that's for sure. He's had to abort it.
I almost feel like someone's accidentally hit the VSC button because that happened very quickly, and now it's green flag again, and nobody's had any kind of moment out on track there. So back to green flag running then, with just over 5 minutes left of free practice 1. Sainz laying down the marker in these early stages on those soft tyre runs, a 1:33.6. 2.5 tenths clear of Max Verstappen. Half a second back is Fernando Alonso. It's actually a decent effort from Alonso in the Aston Martin, especially when you look at Hamilton being 7 tenths off. And I think one thing that we can take away so far from this session, Mark, is that Mercedes do not seem comfortable in either car.
No, I mean, just, when you look at these things, we always try to look beyond just the lap time, and I'm looking at the way the car's looking on track, the way it's handling, the way it's kind of rolling around and crunching curbs, but also the way the drivers are talking, and we've seen concern. So with such a big change on the car, and as you rightly said earlier on, with only one session to really figure it out, it doesn't look happy for Mercedes, which is not going to be a happy position for them to be in. That picture on the timesheets, as Andrew rightly said, is going to be slightly distorted because Charles Leclerc, who would be looking to get a matching time to his teammate Carlos Sainz, who's currently quickest, his lap would have been destroyed by that very brief virtual safety car. So he's had to cool things down and go again, but he would have had the best out of those tyres.
Yes, we haven't really seen what Leclerc can do, neither from George Russell, waiting for Lando Norris as well. He's still down in the pits. A lot of Flovis being sprayed onto his McLaren as well. They brought a fairly sizable upgrade, front wing, front suspension, front rear corner and the beam wing as well, all having upgrades on the McLaren side of it. George Russell, we will see what that Mercedes has got in it and how much he can control the balance of that car, which has looked a bit peaky so far this session. Round the penultimate corner into the braking zone of turn 20, the left-hander chucks it in, manages to keep it within the white line and crosses the line to go 7th fastest, 8 tenths off of Carlos Sainz's time on the same tyre.
Yeah, and that looked like a lap where he was, leaving nothing behind. You know what I mean? He was on the edge. It did come. Oh, there you go. Came across a bit of traffic.
Was that on? I don't think that was on.
No, that can't have been.
That might have been on his build-up lap.
It was. He was trying to get position past the Williams just so he had a clear run for his flying lap, but in the end had to abort it. So he may have been slightly compromised just before he went into the final corner. But either way, the Mercedes of George Russell, I'd say as fast as he can possibly go, and that's still 8 tenths slower than a Ferrari right now.
Still a bit of a lock-up as well for George Russell coming through the left-hander of turn 12 at the end of that back straight. His lap time enough for 7th place. Sainz, Verstappen, Alonso, Tsunoda getting up to 4th in the RB, 7 tenths off. Ahead of Hamilton though, then comes Gasly in the Alpine, Russell 7th, Lawson, Albon on outlaps again, Stroll 10th. It was Franco Colapinto in the Williams, by the way, that was ahead of George Russell and rather balked his warm-up lap. Oscar Piastri, we shall see what the Aussie has got now. He's put the soft tyre on. He's currently down in 17th place, coming through the first sector. We'll see where he compares. Russell on the radio.
Ride is definitely worse. This fuel load.
George Russell saying the ride is definitely worse with the fuel load they've currently got in that car. Piastri fastest of anybody in the middle sector. It's quite nice having breakfast with George Russell this morning, wasn't it? When I say we had breakfast, he was sat at the bar and we were at a table on the other side of the room, but it felt like we were there.
Possible exaggeration, but yeah, we'll take it. I mean, nice to know that we choose the same kind of restaurants as Formula 1 drivers.
I was going to say, George Russell wasn't not staying in a Holiday Inn, is he?
No, we didn't have breakfast there. We were lovely South Congress, lovely place for breakfast there. And actually, Rebecca Clancy gave us the recommendation.
I think I know. Was it? It was a coffee shop up the top of the hill on the left in a hotel.
No, not in a hotel.
But I know it's
lovely breakfast burrito.
Yes,
that one.
Yeah. we could name it.
Wait, I'm actually trying to remember the name.
I think it's Manana, isn't it?
No, something.
Other coffee shops are available.
Two Hands.
Okay.
Two Hands. Other coffee shops may be available. Definitely available.
Just told
Is it down
everyone
the bottom of South Congress as opposed to the top?
I want to say it was in the middle.
I'm going to look it up because I need
Look it up.
to
Lovely
find
place
some
for breakfast. You must join us.
We've also just told everyone where George Russell has breakfast, so there might be a queue tomorrow.
Yeah, we got a table straight away. It was great. That was what's going on. Anyway, Russell was enjoying his start to Friday, I'm sure, with breakfast, but it's gone a bit downhill since then. It is not smooth sailing so far for the Mercedes camps, although Lewis Hamilton closing in a little bit on his second go, now 3.5 tenths off of Carlos Sainz's fastest lap time. Sainz ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc on his soft run. There is nothing between them, though, less than 0.5 tenth of a second.
But just bear in mind, Harry, that Leclerc lap will be on tyres that are effectively already used for one lap, because he did the first two sectors flat out before the virtual safety car, the mystery virtual safety car.
Very good point, thank you. So perhaps more in the tank for Charles Leclerc, but there is good signs from Ferrari as Norris and the whole left side of that McLaren absolutely coated in fluoro and high-vis paint as they try and get an idea of where the aero upgrades are working. Norris coming across the line, though, on that last lap on the soft tyre and putting himself into 4th place. It's the two Ferraris 1 and 2, Verstappen 3rd, Norris 4th, then it's Piastri the top 5, and actually that's the checkered flag. Let's hear from Leclerc.
I don't have the second lap, right?
No, you don't. Next car pushing is no one.
I don't have a second lap, right? That's what Leclerc says. No, you don't. And that will be the checkered flag being the reason for that. So Leclerc's first flying lap on the soft tyre getting rather ruined by the mystery virtual safety car. But I think overall it's looking fairly promising for the two Ferraris, as we'll just get a look at what's going on with Lando Norris on his fast fly. Mark, at the end of the straight, is there a lock-up?
There was, but he didn't actually look that happy all the way round, nor did Oscar Piastri, actually. Although Piastri was very quick in the middle sector, his first and third sector actually weren't that impressive. And there are, as you rightly said at the beginning of the broadcast, there are 3 very distinct sectors here. They're quick in one of them, but not so quick in the others. And you do have to compromise one to get the best out of the other. But at the moment, to be a quarter of a second off a Ferrari in your McLaren is not really where they'd expect to be. At the moment, they've still got Verstappen ahead of the two McLarens. But you rightly say it's the Ferraris that have shown the early signs of having pace here.
And that's our lot of practice as well, because we go straight into qualifying for the sprint race later on this afternoon. A couple of hours break, but it's the two Ferraris who come into this weekend with the fastest lap times. Carlos Sainz at 1:33.6, tops FP1 ahead of Charles Leclerc. Verstappen 3rd, the two McLarens, Norris, Piastri round out the top 5. Then it's the two Mercedes, Kevin Magnussen popping the Haas up into 8th ahead of Alonso in the Aston Martin 9th. Tsunoda in the RB rounds out the top 10. And Hulkenberg, Gasly, Lawson back on the grid for the remainder of the year in his first FP1 starts. Will finish 13th in the RB ahead of Albon. Stroll, Perez down in 16th in the Red Bull ahead of Ocon. Bottas, Franco Colapinto 19th, and Zhou Guanyu, Jenny, 20th and last.
Lovely. Well, that is it. Practice 1 done, and we go straight, as you said, into sprint quali. That means all the cars go round the circuit. They take to the start line. They do their practice start in a grid slot. They pick it themselves. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw, in fairness. They go round, and there's a yellow flag out there at some point as well right now. But they'll go round and then come back into the pit lane. Who's going to be happiest with that? I mean, Ferrari have a very good session out there.
I think Ferrari are going to be really happy with that. You know, this is a team that hasn't brought major upgrades when lots of the teams around them have, and yet they've managed to unlock some pace that has been missing on occasions in recent rounds. So very happy there. Really unhappy, I would say, are the early signs at Mercedes, and McLaren probably somewhere in the middle of that, where really you would expect them to be right at the front. They're not quite there yet.
Just thinking about that, this is a sprint weekend. We know there is only one practice. Ferrari, we were expecting them to bring an upgrade here. They haven't. And I just wonder, would they push that over to next weekend when it's not a sprint format, when they can play around with the settings, they've got loads of practice time to do it, and gain the upper hand of knowing their car, knowing what to expect around this circuit?
Well, I think, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. I think what they have said is they want to really understand what's on the car right now, and this has started in a way that looks very positive for them. What they don't want to do, and this has been part of their problem, is bringing upgrades that don't necessarily work, don't translate the performance they saw in their wind tunnels, in their sort of CFD systems, their sort of simulations. when that doesn't translate to the racetrack, you can end up going backwards. So they've got to be really careful about how they implement upgrades and making sure that the ones they do bring actually bring performance.
It was quite interesting. I was just watching what Red Bull were doing when those last ones were out there, and they were poring over what was happening with Lando Norris's high vis and flow vis on that front left wing, and you know, they know this is a competition between Red Bull and McLaren. McLaren have taken the lead there ahead in the constructors, and Mark, that's quite an exciting prospect going into this final sprint weekend.
Oh, it's set up so well, the remainder of this championship. The Constructors' Championship very much in the hands of McLaren, and they were looking favourites coming into this weekend. The Drivers' Championship is so finely balanced that no one could call that at this point. It looks so close, it could go either way. So it's in a wonderful place, isn't it? As we said right at the beginning, Formula One is great right now.
Yes, join us 10:25 p.m. I know it's quite a late one, but it is sprint qualifying, so join us for that if you would like to. You can also download the Checkered Flag podcast right now if you want to do that. Let's hand you over to Chris Jones for the rugby. He's at Franklin's Garden. Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Yeah, great listen as always from Jenny and the F1 team out in Austin. And as Jenny says, the Checkered Flag podcast, the place to go for all the immediate reaction from on the ground at the USA Grand Prix. But welcome to Franklin's Gardens under the light.